Welcome back. As we keep tracking Helene, we're talking with Houston Chronicle meteorologist Justin Ballard to learn more about what is making the Gulf of Mexico such a hotbed for rapid intensification. Justin, thanks for joining us again on ABC 13 Weather Now.
Thanks for having me to talk about Helene and the Gulf of Mexico. It's almost always a bathwater kind of scenario, and this year's no different, right?
Absolutely. Now, Hurricane Helene already appears to be undergoing that process we call rapid intensification. So, Justin, first take a moment to tell our viewers what rapid intensification is.
So rapid intensification does have a definition, and that means that, in 24 hours time, you have to have wind speeds that increase 35 miles per hour in that 24-hour time span. Now, 79% of major tropical cyclones, those are Cat 3, Cat 4, and Cat 5, rapidly intensify, and that is expected to continue to increase and continue to be a threat here as we see those temperatures across the globe continue to warm. That is, of course, courtesy of our friends at Climate Central. So, Helene is expected to rapidly intensify. We've got a number of examples in the past with rapidly intensifying hurricanes, and Helene has all the ingredients necessary really for really making that benchmark happen.
And the best way that we can tell that it's undergoing is when we have the hurricane hunters flying through sampling data, but there's also some clues that we can see from satellite imagery. We've got the satellite imagery right now of Hurricane Helene. What would we be looking for in that satellite imagery for a strengthening hurricane?
Well, one of the things that I look at, as I'm sure you are also looking at in the newsroom there, is just kind of looking to see what the convection looks like, or that robust thunderstorm activity. So what we're looking at is infrared satellite. Now, the whiter colors that you see, or the lighter colors that you see at the beginning of this satellite loop, that indicates where colder cloud tops are. That means really robust, really strong thunderstorm updrafts within that kind of core of Helene. And we expect to see more of this kind of flourish as the day kind of goes on today into tonight. So that's why we expect Hurricane Helene to go from Cat 1 now to Cat 3 in just the span of 24 hours.
Incredible. And the wind's now at 80 miles per hour, gusts to 100. And a lot of this has to do with those warm water temperatures over the Gulf of Mexico. Talk a little bit about just how warm we're seeing things right now.
I mean, like I said at the very beginning, it's almost like bathwater. Temperatures are in the mid to upper 80s across most of the Gulf of Mexico, the kind of heart of the Gulf of Mexico, as you can see there on the screen. This is more than sufficient. I mean, anything above 80 is sufficient, but when you start getting close to 90 degrees, there's no wonder that Helene's forecast is for it to begin to, it's really rapidly intensify starting today. And there's obviously other ways that we can look at, hurricane fuel. One of those ways is by looking at what's called the ocean heat content. Basically, think of this as how deep that really warm water is. And you can actually see that kind of loop that goes around kind of Cancun, the western side of Cuba. That's called the Gulf Loop Current. And this is where we've got really deep warm water. It's not just warm water at the surface, but really deep warm water for that particular hurricane to kind of feed on and intensify. And unfortunately, it's going to cross over some of the warmest waters in the Gulf of Mexico, some of the deepest warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico as it moves towards the north.
Yeah, not something that you want to see with any storm that's coming out of the Caribbean. Also, with the way the Florida Peninsula just kind of sticks out there into the Gulf and the Atlantic waters, there's a lot of hurricanes that impact Florida, and there's been a noticeable uptick since 2017 when we kind of broke that hurricane drought of major hurricanes making landfall along the United States. And you've been a part of some of those hurricanes that have impacted, especially this part of Florida. The coast, the Big Bend region, has just been under the gun the last few years.
It absolutely has. Before moving to Houston, I was in Gainesville, Florida, kind of in the middle of the state, kind of removed from both coasts, but we were right there in the center there near the Big Bend. And, up until last year, there had only been 2 major hurricanes that struck that part of the state of Florida. And over the last, since 2017, really over the last 7 years, there have been 7 hurricanes that have at least affected the state of Florida, 6 direct landfalls. One of those, of course, Michael, Ian, and Idalia, both of those, as well as Irma, were major hurricanes when they struck. Helene, of course, likely to kind of add to that list. So Florida really, because it does stick out so far, they cannot seem to catch a break from this very active pattern with yet another major hurricane landfall soon on its way.
Well, I suppose the only good thing about this is that folks in Florida are used to this. They know what to do, and hopefully they're heeding all the advice of the local emergency managers to get out of harm's way ahead of Helene. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.